What is the worst business decision you've ever seen? In my hometown there was an independent fast food and homemade ice cream place, long established and run by close friends. It was a gold mine. They decided to sell and retire. New owners immediately changed everything. Painted it a wild color, removed some attractions on the grounds, changed the 60-year-old menu and switched to commercially made ice cream. They lasted 8 months. I'll never understand someone who buys a road-tested, successful business and says to themselves, "You know what this needs to be? Completely fucking different," and proceeds to change stuff, especially the menu. Like someone else already did the hard work of building a profitable brand and product. That's what you paid for. Not the building, the reputation and the food. Property management company I used to work for had a number of student properties and high-rises that were always a struggle to fill in the summer months when students went out of town. Head office came up with an offer that anyone who signed for 2 years got the 4 summer months at 50% off. Sounds like a good deal. 50% rent is much better than zero. We signed tons of students. However, the lease templates that head office sent over showed the reduced rent rate on the lease rather than just adding the discount as a separate addendum. I noticed this discrepancy and reported it, and was subsequently ignored, which meant the students were signing a legal document that guaranteed them 50% rent for 2 years. The company lost hundreds of thousands in revenue. Please tell me someone got fired for this? And please also tell me it wasn't someone who was not to blame. They tried to reprimand me for it as well. However, I had the email receipts that showed I had raised the alarm and that it had fallen on deaf ears. I always put everything in writing, even if it was just to repeat a conversation I had over the phone or in person. That practice has saved my bacon numerous times. I used to work for a company that was bleeding money. In order to try and save money, they decided to stop honoring returns refunds, but still advertised that they did. Whenever someone would ask for a refund, you were supposed to tell the person that it would be processed in the next 6 to 8 weeks, then get them off the phone. 6 to 8 weeks later, when they ask where their money is, you were supposed to apologize and say their paperwork got put in the wrong stack, and that it would be put in the correct stack and would then be processed in the next 6 to 8 weeks. If they complained about the length of time, you were supposed to tell them you can ask your supervisor to expedite it, and they should see it in 4 to 6 weeks instead. If they threatened legal action after months and months, you were supposed to tell them to contact the company legal department. We didn't have a company legal department, and then hang up on them. Then make a note in their account. No one should field calls from that account further. More than half the call center quit in a single week in protest of this decision. Company collapsed in on itself within a few months. My late great-uncle started a fish and chips restaurant. He had his own unique recipe for the fish, and it was very popular. Businessmen had offered him thousands in cash for it over the years, but he always declined. After about 40 or so years, he decided to retire and hand the business over to an ambitious recent college grad. He offered to give her the recipe and even volunteer his services for a bit while she got comfortable in her new role as owner. She declined both, and within a year, she was forced to sell the restaurant after coming close to declaring bankruptcy. My great-uncle died and took the recipe with him to his grave. I worked for a video store during the time Finding Nemo came out on DVD. The video store I worked for got a huge fish tank put inside. It was so big they had to shrink the game rental section. The tank had clownfish in it. The tank was also locked, and we couldn't feed the fish or clean it. This was supposed to be done by someone who I never saw come in. So the tank ended up filled with a bunch of dead Nemos in a nasty as fuck tank. Needless to say, parents were very unhappy about it. The local paper did a small article about it too, which didn't help an already dying store. I have no idea what they thought an expensive as hell fish tank would do for their business. I worked for a design printing place for years, and the owner went from amazing idea to stupid idea on a regular basis. Don't get me wrong, guy is a brilliant designer, totally took advantage of new tech every chance he could and made it work. But he was cheap and greedy, so ruined what would have been lucrative long-term business relationships. So we did this huge order of promo supplies for a fairly big online casino. Huge for him. About a $20,000 order, with good margins, and the chance at long-term work with this company. While it was being picked up, on the spur of the moment, he decides to pad the bill by about $200. The guy picking it up was the son of the casino owner, and literally watched the boss do this while I stood at the till. The customer looks at me, smiles, and pays the bill with a huge wad of cash, and says, "I know it's not your fault, but my family is very wealthy. We didn't get that way letting people rip us off. Tell the boss over in the corner he just fucked himself out of a lot of money, because we loved the work," in a voice meant to carry. Cafe I work for decided it wanted to fire everyone except for the leads and the manager. Then told the manager they weren't paying her salary anymore, and she needed to take on more work. Assumed people would do it because they love their jobs. Take a help desk that has been consistently rated extremely well by its customers for their first call resolve, attitude, and helpfulness. Outsource it to a company that's been rated towards the bottom of the list for over a decade because it costs less than the salaries benefits of your former in-house help desk. Then complain when your first call resolve drops through the floor and your customer satisfaction is at an all-time low. A radio station I used to listen to recently changed their format from 80% music, 20% talk show to 100% talk show. Then they were like, "Oh, you can still listen to the music, but it's only going to be on our app." This one involves my dad. Back in the 80s he decided he wanted to teach people how to use Lotus 123 Excel, MS Word, etc. So he bought a bunch of computers for a classroom, and he wrote interactive learning programs, and printed out manuals and such. Even without advertising, he had people asking to join his class, but he was never quite ready. This Lotus 123 program could use more work. He wasn't ready for a class. This MS Word tutorial isn't quite done. The perfectionist in him wouldn't let him expose the less than perfect programs class to people, just yet. He turned down paying customers for fear that it wasn't just perfect. He had taken a loan out from a friend to finance this, but never made a dime. He paid the loan back by selling our cottage, something he regrets to this day. And why? Because he was afraid to be flawed. That taught me a lesson though, as the old saying goes, perfect is the enemy of done. He could easily have made money and taught his classes, refining the programs to student feedback. He could have covered deficiencies by teaching in person. He was afraid it wasn't perfect, so it was never done. We don't talk about it, or the cottage that we built together. We had the foundation and structure built by pros, then the whole family pitched in to build the interior when we were teens. It saddens me more because it was what he wanted to do, and he went for it, but not quite. Around last year this time of year, I know someone in their early 50s that sold all of their investments, at a significant dip from the highs, and decided to start producing and selling hand sanitizer in little bottles out of their garage, seeing it as a big opportunity with the virus. They spent everything on the bottles, labels, plastic drums full of sanitizer, at a huge markup, hiring locals people to fill the bottles and put the labels on, and then a website. By the time they had inventory, they realized that they couldn't compete on price with places like Walmart or other big box stores that had finally caught up to the shortages by midsummer. They also didn't realize that selling on Amazon was gated for that category, so you had no chance of selling through there as a new seller. So now they basically have a garage full of old hand sanitizer, and no savings. Game shop in my area had a great business plan. They had regular tournaments and games and a sweet membership plan. $10 per month and you get a discount on tournaments, as well as a $10 gift card. Essentially, it just incentivized every single person who went there for any sort of event to spend a minimum of $10 per month. They did great for about 2 years and then decided to change the membership so that you no longer got the $10 gift card, and the store started prioritizing D&D groups over competitive gaming groups. This isn't bad, in theory, aside from the fact that D&D players weren't paying for entry, and they tended to spend less money. So they essentially chased away the customers who spent the most while removing the incentive for anyone to subscribe. The number of customers they had per day did slightly increase, but the amount they were spending, on average, dropped significantly, and they went out of business shortly after. There was a shopping plaza near me with a fairly large gift store. Not a gift shop in the museum sense, basically like a Hallmark store but independent. It wasn't exactly bustling, but they apparently did solid business, and a lot of people in the community really appreciated having it there as a place to buy gifts and wrapping paper and such. The owners of the shopping plaza raise rents to the point that the shop goes out of business. The reason this was stupid is that the storefront sat vacant for like 15 entire years. Seriously, this place closed when I was a child and I'm now 27 and the vacancy was only taken over very recently. If their goal in raising the rent was to have a more profitable store move into that space, they certainly failed and missed out on decades of rent as a result. What is the worst business decision you've ever seen? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.